You say, love makes a difference. Love matters. Taking care of people matters. And if there is no other thing but your body, if there is only this world, if this life is all there is, Francis Crick is right. And love is nothing but a chemical response in the brain that enables you to survive. But there's a different way of looking at it. And by the way, I know plenty of people in New York City who believe that. That's what they say. Everything has a scientific explanation. Everything has a natural cause. Maybe there's a God, but we don't know. We must never take that into account. Secular point of view. And yet nobody lives as if love doesn't matter. Nobody lives as if these thoughts and these feelings are really just chemical responses, though they would be on that point of view. And yet nobody lives that way. Christmas tells you that what your heart intuitively knows is true. Christmas can make you whole, oh New Yorker. If your brain tells you one thing and your heart tells you another thing, so your brain says this is it, but you're not living that way, Christmas can make you whole. Because Christmas proves that love is not something that just happened inside a human brain as a chemical response, but love pre-existed the world, created the world, and is redeeming the world. Where does it get that? Well, the beginning of chapter 1 of John, and the beginning of 1 John, and the beginning of chapter 1 of the Gospel of John, and chapter 5 and chapter 17. John gives us more about the Trinity than any other writer in the Bible. And you notice what it says here is from the beginning. That doesn't say what that's saying. When the beginning of time happened, there was already the Word and the Father. The Son was with the Father. See that? He says, we proclaim to you the eternal life which was with the Father from the beginning. And of course, over in chapter 1 of John, it says, in the beginning, the Word of Christ already was. And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Every other religion says God is a force, or God is a unipersonal being who created. And of course, you can't have love till you create other persons. In other words, you have to have more than one person to have love. So other religions say either God's an impersonal force, or God is a unipersonal being that created, and then love came in. But only Christianity says that God is a communal, glorious love in himself. There's one God, but in that one God, there have always been three persons. And those three persons have been knowing and loving each other and adoring each other from all eternity, which means love love was before the world. And the world came from a God who was already love. Love created the world. The world came out of love. And the world is redeeming love. The love is redeeming the world too. Love is not just a response up in your brain. It was before the world, it created the world, and now it's redeeming the world. Because why did God come to earth? Why did he go to all this incredible trouble to become something that could be seen and heard and tasted and touched? I'll tell you. When I was 11 years old, Yuri Gagarin, the first Russian cosmonaut, orbited the Earth. That was 1961. You can do the math. It was one of the first things I remember of reading in the paper and everybody being really excited about it. And Nikita Khrushchev, who was the premier of Russia at the time, actually said, after that, he said at one point, we in Russia, our official religion is atheism, or we're officially atheists. And we have even more evidence for atheism now because we sent a man into heavens and there was no God there. So we have more evidence than ever. Now, C.S. Lewis was still alive at that time, and he heard what Nikita Khrushchev said, and so he wrote a little essay called The Seeing Eye. And he said, think about it, everybody. If there was a God, you wouldn't relate to God the way a person who lives on the first floor relates to a person who lives on the second floor. See, Nikita Khrushchev was actually saying, he was thinking of God as someone who lives on the second floor. And we were down here on earth, and we sent a man to the second floor, and there was nobody home. So clearly there's nobody up there. And Lewis says, well, think about it. If there was a God, you wouldn't relate to him the way a person on the second floor relates to the person on the third floor. You would relate to him the way Shakespeare relates to Hamlet. See, Shakespeare created Hamlet. And the only way Hamlet can know anything about Shakespeare is if Shakespeare writes something about himself into the play. Hamlet's not going to find anything out about Shakespeare by going up into the rafters of the stage, looking into, upstairs. Only if Shakespeare, how do you say it? Only if the creator, by revelation, reveals something to the creature. You'll only know something about your creator if he writes something into the world, into the play. And then Lewis said, but God did something better than just write some information in. Dorothy L. Sayers was a woman who lived some years ago, and she was the first one of the first women who ever graduated from Oxford, and she was a writer of mystery detective stories. And her most famous character was Lord Peter Wimsey, who was an aristocrat who solved mysteries. And in the middle of all these novels and short stories about Lord Peter Wimsey, who was a single man for for a big period of time, suddenly a woman appears in the novels. Her name is Harriet Vane. She's not very particularly good looking. She's one of the first women who ever graduated from Oxford. She's a writer of detective fiction. And she and Peter meet, and they solve a couple of mysteries, and then they fall in love and live happily ever after. And many people have said that Dorothy Sayers looked into the world she created and looked at the man that she created and fell in love with him and wrote herself into the story because she saw he was lonely and he needed someone to save him. And so she wrote herself in the story, and they lived happily ever after. Isn't that sweet? Isn't that moving? Of course it's moving. And yet God has actually done that. The doctrine of Christmas, the teaching of Christmas, is that the love who created the world and who created us and who knows that we've gone astray and we've gone away from him and we're in a mess. God has looked into the world that he created, and he's looked at us, the main character in the world, human race, and he's loved us. And he wrote himself into the play. He wrote himself into our lives. That's why he was born in a manger. And he came to save us, to live the life we should have lived, to die the death we should have died in our place. There's a barrier between us and God, and as everybody knows, when you wrong someone, there's a barrier in that relationship. God has to, until it's dealt with, God had to deal with it, and that's how he came. Love is not just a chemical reaction or a chemical response. We know it's not. We talk about love, and when we talk about love, we talk about forever. I'll love you forever, which is silly. Why don't we just say, I'll love you till I die or you die? But we don't feel that way. We feel like our love is going to... Well, why do we feel that way? Because love is not a thing originally from time and space. It's come into the world. It's come from somewhere else. Christmas proves that.